Check the rough opening to make sure it's square and plumb. Measure both the door and the rough opening. You want to make sure that the door is 3/8 to 1/2 inch smaller than each side of the rough opening. The door I bought was 80.5 inches tall and the rough opening was 82 inches. I used some layers of OSB left over from other parts of the build to reduce the gap to right around 81 inches. I'm opting to put a sill pan in before installing the door. There's a couple ways you can make your own sill pan, but I ended up purchasing one made from high-impact ABS plastic. To start out, you'll put the corners of the kit in place. Next, you'll measure and trim the center of the sill pan kit. We're going to do one last dry fit because once that glue's on there, there's no going back. The kit comes with PVC cement. You'll apply those to the recessed areas on the side pieces and underside of the centerpiece where it overlaps with those side pieces. We're going to apply 3 beads of silicone caulking to adhere the sill pan to the sill. Press the sill pan in place. I didn't use a traditional weather-resistant barrier like Tyvek, so I'm putting flashing on the sides. If you're doing something like this, just make sure there's 2 inches of flashing on the exterior. Before we put the door in place, put a bead of silicone along the back of the sill pan and along the seams where you glued the sill pan together. When you set the door in, make sure that it makes solid contact with that sealant along the back of the sill pan. Just like the window install video, I'm not really an expert at shimming the doors, but I've provided some videos in the corresponding article. There's links below for that. One thing's for sure though, just take your time and double check things all along the way. The last thing you'll end up doing is replacing out the hinge screws with 3-inch stainless ones. Use some backer rope before you caulk between the door jamb and the rough opening. This will reduce the amount of caulk, and backer rope is way cheaper than caulk. Once the caulk dries, you can use door window spray foam to seal the inside. I wanted to make the trim around the door match the trim that's built into the windows. That trim is 1.25 inches thick, which turns out to be a real pain to find, so I bought some 2x3 pieces of lumber with the idea of making my own. After squaring up the boards, the trim ended up being right around 1.25 inches thick and 2.25 inches wide. We made sure when we installed the door that everything was perfectly level. Only thing is that there's some inconsistencies with the door jamb being flush with the exterior of the rough opening. To fix this and make sure the trim sits flush with the rough opening and the door jamb, I'm cutting a rabbet into the trim. If you end up having to do something like this, you can make that rabbet with a handsaw, a rabbet plane, or a router. I use screws to dry fit everything in place. So I also messed up one of my measurements on the side piece and had to do a join with some scrap to make it work. I used some caulk to hold the trim in place while I was installing it. At first I was good with the 2.5-inch screws that I was using for the install, but then I decided that these things were never coming off, so I swapped those screws out for 4-inch galvanized nails. To finish it up, lay a bead of exterior caulk on the outside and the inside edge of the trim. The doors I got were only primed, so we're going to paint them. Because these are outward swinging doors, the hinges are exterior security hinges. This means that they're small set screws that hold the hinge pins in place. So before you can take those pins out, you'll need to loosen those small screws. For the inside of the doors, I'm using some white interior-exterior urethane alkyd semi-gloss enamel paint. That was a mouthful. For the outside facing part of the door, I'm using some gray enamel paint. You're about to see how I should have thinned the paint and had that surface laying flat whenever I sprayed it. That's not what happened. With the first coat of paint spraying those doors straight up, I quickly realized that there was too much paint getting laid down. But I did manage to lay the pieces down and the paint ended up evening out. So even with that first mess up, of course nothing ever wants to work out right the first time. That night the temperature dropped, there was too much humidity, and then in the morning there was ice on top of the paint that kept it from drying properly. Totally jacked the paint. Needless to say, I got really good at sanding down the messed up areas. So here we go again. Then I had a great idea. The shed would be an awesome spray booth. So that worked out really good until a fly landed on my half-dried paint and did a death roll all over everything. So the third time was a charm because, I'm good at sanding the doors now. And I thinned the paint a little bit, so that helped out. Pain. So I've listed out everything I've learned from painting these doors in the article down below. Now that we got the doors back on, let's drill the holes for that secondary door bolt. When I ordered the door, I ordered it with 2 pre-drilled holes for the handset portion of the Lockset. But of course, I had to save up and get that fancy Lockset that requires 3 holes in the door. Using the template supplied with the Lockset was actually pretty straightforward. The only thing that took a little bit of time was aligning the pre-drilled holes with the ones in the template. I would have been worried about whether or not the drill was perfectly perpendicular with some of these larger holes, but using the Lockset drilling guide really kind of gave me confidence with this process. When I ordered these doors, I had the secondary door be the one on the right. The way these doors are designed, the striker plate for the Lockset is built into an aluminum piece on that secondary door. I did have to make some modifications to the aluminum piece to make the latch and the deadbolt work smoothly. Last thing we're going to do is install a drip edge above the door. The drip edge I'm using is 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. Make sure when you nail it in place with roofing nails that you're nailing into the upper third part of the drip edge. Put flashing tape over the top edge of the flashing you just installed, making sure that you cover up the nails. So this part of the project was kind of pricey because of the custom door. It ended up being $1,063, bringing the shed total to $4,925. Luckily, I was able to save up money whenever I figured out I wanted to do a custom door and was able to pay cash for the door. So it took a bit, but I don't know, it's kind of nice. I think it's worth it.